Welcome back, everyone. It is the Pleb Underground. We have another live interview / discussion, and I am going to bring on my my fellow co-host and the guest, and then we're going to move over to the sponsors and then dive into this very cosmic conversation. So here we go. I'd like to welcome Ulric to the stage. That's right.
What's up, Bill?
What's up? And our guest for today, Tomer Strolight.
The latter.
The latter. What's up, Tomer? How you doing, man?
What's happening?
I'm good. How are you guys?
Very good. Very good. Happy to have you here. It's going to be a cosmic conversation right going into Memorial Day weekend here in the US. So it should be a lot of fun. Guys, before we dive into the conversation, though, you know the drill. Got to give some love to the sponsors. We are going to be back in 30 seconds. So here we go. Head on over to Archimedes Emporium. They make absolutely beautiful Bitcoin branded products. They just dropped their first one. It is the solid aluminum Bitcoin clock. I had to get my hands on it so that I could show it to you guys. Take a look. Really, really nice piece. Beautiful craftsmanship. Head on over to archamp.co. The link is going to be in the show notes. That is Archimedes Emporium. Head on over there. All right. We are back. Yeah, nice clock. It's Daniel from CipherSafe that makes it. Yeah, he owns a company called Numberall, and he does all kinds of CNC machining. Anyways, all right. So let's dive into it. We got a lot of different topics to cover with Tomer. Before we do though, before we get into that, I just would like to show this because it's relevant to Bitcoin, right? Bitcoin bull run, and people are scamming. So shout out to Frito2X for providing this screenshot of an email that he got from Trezor. So take a look at it. Sorry?
Allegedly,
exactly. Very good point.
Trezor,
So take a look at this one, guys. The Trezor Mini Safe 5, a secure secondary device. I guess they're trying to do some type of a play on the foundation, the new foundation offering. Anyway, so here we go. Going forward, all transactions will require physical approval on both devices, adding an isolated layer of verification, even if your primary environment is compromised. Look at that, guys. Trezor's just going to go and send you hardware, guys. The Mini Safe 5 is provided at no cost, and you just request your device right here. Obviously, this is a scam. Trezor's not giving you another device. You can still use your Trezor right now. If you decide to transfer Bitcoin, you do not need this separate device. This is just complete nonsense. But just a good heads up for people, right? Like that, we got to give a heads up to the people.
So it's amazing because all these people who are now
you're saying that Trezor is not handing out free hardware at a website named trezor-minisafe.com.
I know, right? It's close to seeming legit, isn't it?
Good.
Yeah. Okay. I'm sorry, Ulric. What were you saying?
No. I mean, at an all-time high, you have these people who are coming in, not understanding all the nuances. These scams are happening. It seems like every couple years, every time Bitcoin changes its denomination a little bit, new people are interested, and they know, and they come out with the same old tired formulas. And so it's people like us who have to continually rehearse these narratives to save essentially the newbies that are coming around. I know a lot of people that are brand new buying Bitcoin during the Trump pump, buying it at the all-time high. And it's important to, hey, we all learned this back in 2020 or 2017 or 2015, but it begs rehashing.
Yeah.
So maybe like the rule of thumb is, since we're on this topic, never, ever, 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 under any circumstances, ever enter your seed phrase into a website or a computer. It's meant to be offline. And if anybody, including someone who looks like the person who sold you the hardware wallet, is telling you to put the password in, the seed phrase in, it is a scam. And it may look really legit, and they may be scaring you that someone else will do something with your Bitcoin. That's not true. When you give them your seed phrase, they will take your Bitcoin. And that is what they're trying to do. So do not give up your seed phrase. Do not ever put it online. Anyone who knows where your seed phrase is, repeat this to them. Never, ever, ever, under any circumstances, put that seed phrase into any website or any online connected device. And then you're safe.
I can confirm. I did this in 2017 when I was still a noob in shitcoining. And as you would imagine, all of my shitcoins disappeared. So it wasn't even Bitcoin. It was just a whole bunch of shitcoins, but still. You know, like I got to go and watch some foreign wallet, right, accumulate over 400 at the time. It was like $430,000 worth of tokens from people just like me. But yeah, okay. So there you go. That's our public service announcement, guys, from Pleb Underground. Just don't fall for this crap. It is the bull run. The scammers want to take your money. Believe it or not, it is way easier for them to issue you issue you some fake device than it is to try to get you with a wrench attack. Okay, so scamming is actually way easier. We're gonna move on from there. And yeah, guys, you probably noticed the chat now pops up on the screen. This is like this is a nice little thing here that so that's right. Everybody can see what everybody says. So Tomer, let's dive into it. I want to start off just quick. Let's do the rabbit hole story before we start taking a look at some different, I guess some different cosmic views of Tomer. So how did you end up in Bitcoin? And let's start from there.
I first heard about it from a friend on Reddit who said, "Have you heard about this thing called Bitcoin? It's money that exists only on the internet, and it was created by somebody who nobody knows who they are. And there's a white paper you should read." That was my introduction to it. I read it. I didn't fully understand. I knew that I didn't fully understand, but it seemed very intriguing at the time. And so I just ended up falling deeper and deeper and deeper down the rabbit hole. I was curious to get my hands on some Bitcoin. I was curious to understand how it works, find educational resources. This was back in 2013, so there wasn't a lot. There were like no podcasts. Andreas was pretty much the only educator, and there was the Bitcoin Talk forum. The Bitcoin Reddit hadn't even really gotten started. So that was for me the early part of my falling into the Bitcoin rabbit hole, and then I really got involved. I participated in the block size wars in 2017, and I ended up dedicating myself full time to Bitcoin during the COVID hysteria because I lost my job outside of Bitcoin. And I said, you know what, I'm just going to dedicate all my time. I'm really passionate about this thing. I've spent 5 years, maybe more, I guess 7 years at the time, really studying it quite deeply. And I've got stuff I want to say about it. So I started writing about Bitcoin and tweeting about Bitcoin and talking about Bitcoin, and a few things happened. I ended up writing a couple of books, making a couple of movies, working for Swan as editor-in-chief. I wrote a lot of essays and held a lot of Twitter spaces. So I consider myself a Bitcoin educator.
Mm-hmm.
But that's about it. Well, that's about
very nice. Very nice. We actually have a comment here from the chat, the live chat. Torup is asking, he goes, "We're here for the unfiltered thoughts on Swan the past few years." Yeah. I don't know if there's anything you can share, but obviously, right? Like we've all, as Bitcoiners, as plebs, you know, we paid attention to the story, and this is not a whole entire episode, dedicated or anything.
Yeah, that's not what I'm here for,
Yeah. But they're definitely having a bit of a hard time right now, and it seems like they're trying to pick up the pieces.
Yeah,
for sure. But moving on from that, sorry, Torup. Sorry, man. We've talked a lot about Swan on this.
But if I can interject, it's funny because like when I went to go work at Swan for a few months, 7 months, I was one of the great things about it was being able to interact with Tomer on a regular basis. Like over the years of learning about Bitcoin and contributing via writing like him, I was like, hey, I liked his style. I wanted to emulate that to a degree. And he had several opportunities to give me some tips and tricks on how I presented my narrative. So Tomer, I want to thank you for all of that back in the day. And I guess maybe this would be a good opportunity before we get into some of his recent stuff to kind of talk about an article that that impacted me. And I think is one of your most famous. And I didn't even tell you about this, Tomer, before, but the problem with Ethereum that you wrote on a Medium back in the day. Yeah. I just kind of want you to if you can give a quick synopsis to the audience, like what was the driving force, or if you could just summarize it essentially for everyone. And I want to maybe focus on this one quote that I have here that was from the end of your article. It says, any abuses that a central bank digital currency is vulnerable to, so too is Ethereum, especially based on the history of its ruling class intervening to change the rules to always make things better for themselves and keep them in power. So if you can, just kind of give people a blast from the past about that infamous and great article.
Yeah, the most widely read article I ever wrote, because it got to like the #1 spot of a number of different websites that report on tech and crypto, I suppose.
Nice.
I'd been watching Ethereum since its launch, and I thought there were quite a few things that troubled me about it, and more things that became troublesome along the way. Like, I was worried that they were putting out unsupervised, unaudited code, and then sure enough, the DAO hack occurred, and all this money got drained, and so they had a huge problem, and then they decided to hard fork. But there was something much more sinister or fiat in its nature about Ethereum that it was really troubling me. And this was, when I wrote this, it was kind of at a point where I was taking I had a voice recorder with me, because when I was driving, I wanted to record notes for recording later. And this was when they had just launched another hard fork that this time took away more miner rewards, and so reduced the reward for the miners who were doing the work, and started to give rewards to people who staked their coins. So people who got rich were getting richer, and people who were working were getting poorer. And there was just something about that was so reminiscent of the fiat monetary system that I wanted to be able to explain it and explore it in layperson's terms, because so few people were sophisticated in crypto. And so I dictated a bunch of notes, and I was quite agitated by this, because I found it a moral affront to say, well, we're going to start taking from the workers and giving to the wealthy, start taking from the people who are securing the chain and giving to the people who have benefited from being rich in the chain. And so I went through the whole history of Ethereum, and we don't need to go through the whole article. Maybe you guys can share it in the notes or something. But
Absolutely.
it began with saying, let's say you're going to start this new community called Ethereum. There's going to be different groups of people. There's going to be the founders, who reward themselves with a lot of pre-mined coins, but they get that for founding it. But there's going to be the workers, the miners, who have to put in the work, and there's an agreement that they're going to get paid 5 units per block, per unit of work. They're going to get 5 units of the currency. And then there will be the ruling class, which would be the people who make the rules, the developers, and there would be the regular class, not the pleb class in that case, but the Ethereans, the people who use the system. And what I then showed was how, through the short history of Ethereum, the workers kept getting robbed by the ruling class, who had made a promise to deliver this proof of stake solution, but kept failing to deliver it. But that was okay, because they kept rewarding the voting class, right, with the taxes that they were collecting from the working class. And so, at the end of it, like, to really abbreviate it, this was a situation where not everybody was equal in the system. What Vitalik said he said, we're hard forking, and the hard fork to recoup the funds of the founders that was lost in the DAO comes back, and code is not law. What I say is law, right? And so we have this ruler, and we have the rulers continuously not delivering on what they've promised to deliver, but making up for it by taking away from the workers. So I don't mean for it to sound too Marxist, but it's
That's what it is.
It's exactly the exploitation that we see in the fiat monetary system that is broken, but just at a much, much accelerated pace, which is why that concluding sentence that Ulrich read out was there. And I said, like, this would not and could not happen in Bitcoin. The idea that we would change the monetary policy to take away something from the miners that was a promise that was made at the founding of Bitcoin is outrageous, and it just simply won't take place. But the number of times that this had happened, and Ethereum actually changed the culture around to a culture where we need upgrades. I'm making air quotes on. We need the rulers to come in and benevolently change the system to make it better, so that we all benefit from it somehow. And every time they make the change, it's not everyone who benefits. It's some who benefit at the expense of the others. And they're not wise, benevolent rulers. They're human beings who are interested in helping themselves, which is what they did with pretty much every single hard fork of Ethereum. So I kind of laid it out there, and it was very revealing and very telling on a number of dimensions. One, to differentiate Bitcoin from Ethereum, but two, also to just show how different, or how similar the crypto was to the fiat world, and how it not only wasn't fixing it, it was just playing out in a much accelerated fashion, because there wasn't democracy to protect it. There weren't checks and balances at all. There was the reality of the situation, which in Ethereum there was the Ethereum Foundation and Vitalik, and they called the shots, period.
You're motivating some people here in the chat, because as we're talking about this, right, ZLogic. So of course we've discussed now with several different guests the whole op return drama. I've obviously followed quite a few of your posts as well on the op return drama.
Yeah.
ZLogic is because I mean this is kind of related in a way. In terms of the narratives, right? Because to a certain extent, right, we have seen the narrative of, hey, you're trying, not you, but group of people are trying to turn Bitcoin, into this shitcoin circus. So yeah, ZLogic is very curious on your thoughts about Bitcoin Core's shenanigans right now. Or, I mean, perceived shenanigans. Right. So we can probably start talking. We can probably start talking about that right away.
Okay. I don't want to take too much time on it. I think what's happening is actually really good for Bitcoin. Although people are like, "Oh no, there's a fight and Core is losing." It's like, this is decentralization. That's how it works, right? It isn't somebody at the center says what's best for everybody else and everybody just accepts it, even if they're right. So setting aside whether, and I think for me, if I'm going to introduce something new to the discussion, I think both sides of this are talking a little bit past each other. What I would accuse Core of being guilty of is compartmentalization. They are neglecting to look at the broader picture that the filter boys, that's what they're called, the other side of this thing, that the filter boys are trying to say. They're trying to say spam in general is a problem. We should be doing everything we can to address it. Core is saying we're expanding the op return. If people spam in here, it's better than spamming somewhere else. And this is the conversation, right? Yeah. And so then the pro filter people say, well, we need to address all of the facets of spam as best we can to be realistic about what we can get and make it and deter spam as much as we can so that the harm is minimized. And Core says, you can't stop it altogether. So it's like, well, that's not what neither side is addressing the points of the other. I mean, I tend to view that the filter side of this is more rational, as opposed to rationalistic, because when you only look at some of the fact and you don't look at the broader context, yes, you can say what you're saying, and yes, it's true in that context, but it's ignoring the broader context. So I think this is healthy. What's happening, in fact, though, I actually think it's good. It causes you to question whether or not Core is right all the time. And of all the entities that exist in and around Bitcoin, the one we have to be most critical of is the one that writes the code that we run, right? Because there's a risk that they're the rule makers here, and they've been accused in this case of being inconsiderate of the objections of the community. So if that's the case, there is a real controversy here. Again, whether in practice it's very valid or not is actually beside the point. What the main point is if you're going to take a job in Core, you have to be prepared that you are the last person people are going to trust, right? Bitcoin's slogan is don't trust, verify. It's not because you have a history of being corrupt. It's because corruption you is devastating, has devastating consequences to the whole thing. And so, and even a mistake has devastating consequences to the whole thing, right? There was once an inflation bug that was introduced and fortunately caught and repaired in advance, but that's why we can't trust core, not even because they made the mistake, because the potential of them making a mistake is really, really harmful. So we need to be really vigilant, really tough, and they need to be prepared to accept that level of criticism as part of, and we should all agree as to what type of criticism takes place. Criticism on GitHub should be of code, not of individuals, but there needs to be the mailing list for that other stuff. And it would be nice if we could all talk in one or several coordinated places, but that would be centralized as well. So this needs to look messy. It needs to be messy. And, and it's very good that there is an alternative client just in case something goes wrong, right, with core. So it's tough, but it's necessary, right? Like, you don't get decentralization and anti-fragility and all these promises for nothing. It requires constant vigilance, and it requires putting up with disagreement and taking a long time. And maybe the reality is the Bitcoin at the level of Bitcoin, not the level of the Bitcoin nodes and not the level of higher level things, has ossified. It's too hard to change. Like, what's being proposed, being changed, is not core in Bitcoin. It's not Bitcoin protocol. It's Bitcoin relay. It's Bitcoin core relay policy, and that's become so controversial that it's hard to get a change, and that lots of people are fighting over, tightening the relay policy, and others want to loosen the relay policy. And in the meantime, nothing's expected to change. That's ossification, de facto ossification, and it's okay, because we can fix or improve at higher levels all sorts of things. Lots of other protocols have been ossified for very long, and if you think you can come up with an improvement to them, you're wasting your time, because nobody's going to change them, because the whole world runs on these protocols, and tweaking them could break the whole world. So it's all for the good. I know it's taking up a lot of people's energy and breath, and that's the way decentralization works.
Man, very well explained. And to your point, right, there needs to be some waste, unfortunately, right? That there needs to kind of be that proof of, I guess, that proof of wasted energy on this. But as you were explaining your perspective on this, it got me thinking, how do you feel about, or what do you think about how Mechanic was handled? Because on GitHub, like I am not convinced, like, I said this, I don't remember in which episode, but I'm convinced almost that if they didn't ban him from GitHub, like, this conversation would have gone a different way.
Yeah, I think so. There's lots of lessons learned about how to conduct yourself, and there is absolutely a double standard, by the way, right? Like, core has to play the high ground all the time, and they didn't. They were dismissive. They blocked him. They said this isn't the way, and then troops came in to defend what was an incorrect action, because it shouldn't have been blocked. It should have been, take this conversation somewhere else, please. Or, there should have been an acknowledgement. And I think the lack of acknowledgement of the validity of the opinions of this side that is in favor of filters had been festering for a couple of years already, right? Luke had put forward a proposal to get rid of the inscriptions in the relay policy, and core changed the documentation of the functionality of Taproot to say that it's meant that this isn't a bug, but it's a feature, and nobody got a lot of satisfaction out of that, at least principled satisfaction, right? The discussion then wasn't had. So what happened to Mechanic was a repeat of what had happened to Luke, but with a greater affront, because when it happened to Luke, it was like, well, what you're suggesting is controversial, so it's off the table and we're not discussing it. And what Mechanic said is, okay, well, what you guys are suggesting is controversial, so by the same standard, let's take it off. And they were like, well, no, if we suggest something that's controversial, it's okay. That's not exactly what they said, but that was effectively it. They said, you can't deem what we're the deciders of what's controversial or not. So that all feels very centralized, and they need to be held to a standard where they don't get to decide on behalf of everybody else. Or it's more like that Ethereum article that I wrote. And thankfully, You know, we're not anywhere near that situation. But I think some people inside of core are going to have to decide: do they want to put up with the rapidity and vociferousness of the community that's going to be really tough on things and have very strong opinions on everything? In this particular case, I think that there's a lot of people who are very thoughtful people in the Bitcoin community who, so it's not easy to dismiss, right? I don't think mechanics wacky, right? I think his objections come from something that we all had to live through, which was the JPEG or the inscription and BRC20 spam attack, which cost a lot of money to users of Bitcoin in terms of elevated fees, and ultimately turned out to be, you know, not of significant value to Bitcoin, not of significant value to miners in the long term, certainly not to investors who were told that they were getting something that it turned out that they weren't getting. So there's righteousness behind the ideas here, and I would like to see core open up more to a broader context, rational discussion around this, where they acknowledge the points that are being made rather than try to compartmentalize things to say, well, you know, we're only making this one change, and this one change has, doesn't have the impact that you're concerned about talking about all these other bigger things. I hope
Tomer, it seems like there's a interesting segue based on the conversations you're having. You know, with decentralization, we lose this hold on these institutions aren't necessarily providing this filter of people being people. And you had a tweet recently. Phil did a great job of collecting some of your recent tweets and your pinings. And you had one that talked about emotional intelligence. And you know, I'm kind of skipping over. Phil, if you're talking, you may be muted. Oh, okay. And I just want to know, you know, and yeah, there it is right there. Is you had a spaces. I kind of want you to dive down, maybe give a synopsis of what came about from that space, and talk about, you know, what your perspectives are and why you felt the need to bring this up in essentially Bitcoin Twitter.
Sure. Well, I feel a broad need to bring critical thinking and the art of thinking to the table, not to one particular argument that Bitcoiners are having, but to the general skill set, because there is a lot of dialogue that takes place on Twitter. It's perhaps not the very best place, but both in spaces and in just the back and forth tweets. And there's some dialogue that takes place in Nostr, and there's still something going on Reddit apparently. But there are valid means of dialogue and valid means of coming to conclusions on things. And calling other people fucking retards is not one of them. Right? Just insulting people, bullying people, blocking them. That's not rational discourse. And calling people clowns. Like, there's just an endless stream of invalid rhetoric that's taking place, and it gets emotionally heated, and then so people get angry and they shut down. And I do this Bitcoin Philosophy Sunday every Sunday, trying to delve into some other aspect of Bitcoin and integrate something philosophical in there. But I've been feeling, and emotional intelligence was the first of these that I did, to really talk about the art of thinking. And I'm probably going to do something on informal logical fallacies this Sunday, and formal logical fallacies next Sunday, and induction and deduction, all these kinds of things, because we don't get taught these tools at school, just like we don't get taught about money. And Bitcoiners are very quick to point out, why don't they teach us about money? Because they don't want us to know about it. And there's a part of me that says, why don't they teach us the arts of thinking and emotional management and control? It's because that's not what's important to the powers that be, right? Or how have they missed so many important things by such a big degree? But emotional intelligence was a really good space, and it's recorded, so I encourage people to listen to it. But it's like the main thrust of emotional intelligence is emotions aren't valid means of knowledge, right? Like if I say something and it makes you angry, that doesn't mean it's bad, right? If it makes you scared, that doesn't mean it's bad. If it makes you happy, it doesn't mean it's good. You need to have the reasonable, rational arguments. And our brains are actually, they have many compartments to them. You may have heard of the neocortex. That's the big part right under your forehead. That's the advanced part that's most developed in human beings. That's where all your rational, critical thought takes place, your language center, all deductive reasoning, inductive logic, all that kind of stuff. And then at the base of your brain, connected to your nervous system, is this little thing that's about the size of an almond called the amygdala, which all animals have. And it's often called the reptilian brain. And it is where your emotions are stored. And it doesn't think rationally, but it remembers, this was a bad moment. It's there to put you in fight, flight, or freeze mode. Like a tiger jumps out at you at the jungle. You don't have time to think critically. I wonder what color it is. I wonder if there's you got to do something to save your life right away. And so it's actually has the ability to hijack your entire brain, right? It releases chemicals that basically put your neocortex to sleep and puts you into fight, flight, or freeze mode, depending on what the amygdala is doing. And this, evolved in the jungle, but it hasn't gone away. Like, we're not quick to evolve it away now that we live in the city. And so it's still a phenomenon. And so if someone jumps out at you with saying, your idea is stupid, that can emotionally hijack you, emotionally trigger you, and you really lose your mental faculties. And the fight mode is, well, you're a fucking retard, and you're a clown, and you're stupid. And you see many people who are just in that mode, and we don't move forward on a rational basis. So to me, that whole spaces was about teaching people that this exists, how to notice it in yourself, and what you can do about it to better manage your emotions. And really the skill of emotional intelligence, because it's more of a skill than a natural gift, is first to be aware of your emotions, second to control your emotions, and third to be aware of other people's emotions and sympathetic to what they need to do to control their emotions. And once that's all under control, then you can have logical, rational dialogue with other people and come to a mutual understanding rather than just bitterness and hatred towards each other.
I think you absolutely nailed it. And this is, this in my eyes is kind of by design, right? The lack of emotional intelligence, or the lack of that type of material being provided, right, in terms of a school system or something like that, by default. I mean, it is done by design. And it kind of reminds me of Timothy Leary's 8 Circuits of Consciousness. And essentially, like, the TLDR is that most humans are spending their time in, like, second circuit consciousness, which is essentially not the parasympathetic, but the sympathetic nervous system, where essentially it's the they're almost in a state of flight or fight.
Yeah.
And that's kind of like, if you take a look at the way, if we zoom out, we look at mainstream media, we look at all the different societal pressures and stuff like that, there is there's kind of this leaning to keeping people in that particular state. And our brains are wired to survive, not to thrive. Like that's really what it is. So we actually,
the whole hierarchy, whether you call it Maslow's hierarchy or Timothy Leary's 8 Circuits, it is actually hardwired into the structure of our brain, right? There are layers, hierarchical layers of control, and the basic survival needs will take over completely from the other. So one's this abstract model, but it actually, the more you study the brain science behind what's going on up here, the more you realize it's actually just an illustration of the construct of the brain.
So let me ask you this. Are we, I've been reading R. Buckminster Fuller's The Critical Path for the last month.
I haven't read that.
It's so parts of it are extremely dry, but parts of it are just absolutely mind-blowing. And I'm getting finally towards the end. And one of the things he talks about, which makes me think of a lot of the stuff that you talk about, is that, do you think, are we ultimately using Bitcoin right now as correctly as we could? Right? Like, in the sense, I guess the grand sense that I'm trying to say is, oftentimes throughout history, we've used technology possibly incorrectly, right? Like, not to its fullest potential of what it can be. And as a result, we get this kind of this derivative reality. Like, for example, right, like we've got a whole bunch of tech in our phones, right? But are we really using this technology to, you know, to its greatest extent? So that's what I mean by that question about Bitcoin. What are your thoughts?
Well, I
on
mean, the first question is what do we mean by to its fullest extent? What do we
Right.
mean by using technology correctly? You know, there are people who create technologies with a particular vision, and they expect it to go a certain way. Like the internet was thought, oh, we're going to invent the internet, and everyone's going to have access to all the world's information, and everyone's going to be wiser and more intelligent. And we can see that it's done the opposite. It's overwhelmed us with misinformation. It's endless propaganda, and, you know, and it's made us intellectually lazy. We use it as a crutch rather than as a resource. So, but is that to say we're using it incorrectly, or we're just using it, right?
Or we're learning.
Were people incorrect in their initial estimates of how this technology would get applied? So, you know, I think the thing with Bitcoin is we're obviously not using it to its fullest potential yet, because most people aren't using it at all. Right? And there's a, you know,
good point.
that like, so it has to go through this adoption curve, first of all, this awareness curve, and also this understanding curve, because it's such a radical technology that it's not really like anything anybody's ever seen before. And in those nuances of what makes it so different is where you can use it more correctly, right? Like people, just as a narrow example, people who buy ETFs and think that they have Bitcoin have a form of Bitcoin that they can't spend, that they can't self-custody, that has counterparty risk, that has custodial risk, that has regulatory risk. So they have a very diminished version of this thing, and it really only has value in the fiat realm, right? It has a fiat price that you can sell for fiat dollars and spend fiat dollars. So it's a very, very different thing from what Bitcoin is. But many people will think, oh, I have Bitcoin in my retirement fund because I have the BlackRock ETF there. And you know, Bitcoin doesn't go in your retirement fund. Bitcoin is self-custodied, you know, peer-to-peer electronic cash. So even there's so much learning. So I think we have a huge way to go in terms of people getting accustomed to it. Some people think it's 3 generations. Some people think it's 1 generation. Like, it's hard to know exactly. We're at the cusp of this thing. We're like really the early adopters, still very much so, if not even still the innovators of the use of this technology and the spread of it, which means we're living in a very special time of it where we can use it in a way that it hasn't metastasized in the way that the internet has, but it's also not as widespread. Kind of like when the internet didn't have all the world's information and it just had a few websites, and you could find out some really interesting Star Trek trivia, but you couldn't find out, you know, what stock prices were.
Yes. I remember those days. I remember those days of the internet. Those were good times. That was, in my eyes, that was the real internet, right? It kind of, I watched a lot of that channel, Upper Echelon, and he's done quite a few videos about the dead internet theory. And I gotta say, I am a believer of the dead internet. I feel as though it was so much bigger. I feel as though people were being more creative, and somehow it kind of like,
today you could probably use an LLM to simulate it,
right? Isn't that creepy? But it's cool.
But that old internet is gone, right?
You know, it's funny because like hearing the stories that Phil has told me, he's a little older than me, and so it's like, and I remember my early exposure to the internet was basically almost like a higher layer by logging into AOL and only using the apps on AOL. And so like even knowing that www dot was there, it's like, I don't want to touch that. But of course I was younger and all I wanted to do was play Carmen Sandiego. But it's like, I remember seeing recent videos of the old internet and what was there. And even as a Bitcoiner, libertarian, you know, buck the Fed, it was like, you know, I'm getting goosebumps thinking about, oh my gosh, that's kind of edgy. And it's like the internet was for pioneers, to say the least, back in the day. They were true pioneers.
And we're going through the same thing, right? I've said Bitcoin was a new frontier, and the people there right now are living on the new frontier. And when the pioneers, the pilgrims came, they weren't greeted by the Department of Homeland Security and, you know, and shown the way to the nearest McDonald's. There was nothing. There was hostile nature and potentially hostile natives. And, you know, and you had to make your own way, clearing the land and, you know, doing whatever it was that you could do to survive. That's the stage that Bitcoin is at. We're really developing the base infrastructure for its widespread use, and more people are coming every day. So the population of Bitcoin land is growing and it's getting more advanced, but it takes time to build an empire. And that's really what Bitcoin is. It's a new kind of empire that's geographically distributed all over the world, but anyone can become a citizen of it. Anyone can join it, and becoming a citizen of it gives you certain protections, but also certain responsibilities.
Yeah. And speaking of, oh, go ahead, Ulrich.
No, I want to ask this question, but that from one of his tweets, but I want to test Phil. Let's see what you're going to bring up. Go ahead, Phil.
Well,
Your
because
segue.
he's talking about the past. So I was going to bring up this particular tweet about the mining council, because I don't think that Bitcoiners today are aware of the Bitcoin mining council. So I'm not.
It wasn't that long ago.
Do that, and I'll come back. I want to bring up one of his tweets recently. Go ahead.
Okay. Cool. So yeah, so let's pop this one up here. Let's take a look. So yes, Tomer, I am also old enough to remember the Bitcoin mining council.
Yeah, it wasn't that long ago. It was like 3 years ago. But it was this interesting phenomenon. You know, Michael Saylor was becoming big in Bitcoin, and you know, and people were worried about, you know, what's he going to say? What's he going to do? Is he going to try to because I think the Bitcoin Mining Council was after he had persuaded Elon Musk to put $1 billion into Bitcoin, and then Elon Musk wanted to change Bitcoin, and we told Elon Musk to go fuck himself. We were like, oh boy, now Michael Saylor is getting involved with mining. What's going to be here? And it was at a time when Bitcoin mining was kind of under public attack because it used energy, and energy is bad. Energy is going to melt the ice caps and flood the cities. So I think what his intent there was to like, let's get the mining companies together. Let's publicly report how much clean energy we're using versus how much carbon energy we're using versus this, that, the other. And it was like, you know, there was a stream of the first one and then the next couple as well. And people tuned in with it, you know, with a lot of intensity, a lot of like ready to be highly scrutinous and highly skeptical of what got said here, because we've been attacked by the miners before in refusing to approve the SegWit soft fork. So that the whole block size war was there. And now we have a big corporate individual and the miners all getting together. We need to watch out. We've been through this before. That was the New York agreement during the block size war, when the corporations told us what they thought Bitcoin would be. And the plebs all said, well, we'll tell you what it's going to be, the other way around. So there was an intensity to it. And what ended up happening, as far as I can tell, was all that scrutiny that miners found themselves under for using energy has kind of gone away. And nobody's really talking about it anymore because artificial intelligence came in and it's using more energy, and Silicon Valley's behind it, and the regime has changed in Washington and they're not after crypto anymore. So it doesn't really matter anymore. And if you go to the Bitcoin Mining Council's website, it's a 404 error. It doesn't exist anymore, right? Nobody's even bothering to spend $15 a year to keep, or $50 a year to keep the basic website up, let alone update the statistics of the Bitcoin Mining Council, which just goes to show how, you know, how Bitcoin can sprout an organ that it needs for a particular infection, and then it doesn't waste energy continuing to keep that organ alive when there's no need for it any longer.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point. And I also think essentially that it kind of points out the nonsense of essentially some of what these attacks that come from these different, I guess, government-funded NGOs or environmental agencies and stuff like that. It's like, it's got nothing to do with actually solving some particular issue. It just has to do with, at least in my eyes, the creation of income to support narratives. So it's like, did these people, you know, did these people that were attacking Bitcoin and its energy usage, like, do they really care about the energy? Do they really care about the environment? Do they really care about any of these things? And even if they did, if they actually did, would they be reacting the way that they are? Because there's a certain fundamental misunderstanding, right? Like at least in terms of these people like the World Economic Forum who have tried to convince us that this low energy future is the way to go. We have a whole history of humanity and technology that shows the complete opposite. There's nothing wrong with having efficiencies, but to a certain extent, at least in my eyes, you do have to use increased power.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I feel like so many things are fake and gay. They just are,
you don't have to pay attention to them.
No, we don't. But I still get mad, man. I still get triggered. And I know that's part of the emotional intelligence, right? Like, I shouldn't let it get the better of me, right? I should be able to examine the thought, right? Let it do what it's going to do and just simply have radical acceptance and move on.
Right.
So.
I think we're still on this basically this theme of people being tested and essentially in real time continually and essentially failing. And there's these pioneers, people who show up at the edge of civilization and they make a decision. And everyone who's heard about Bitcoin is making a decision, whether it's say, the media doesn't like it, so therefore I'm not going to like it. Or this president doesn't like it, so I'm not going to like it. Or this president likes it, so now I like it, but only in the form of a Bitcoin bank or whatever, or in the form of an equity. My question to you is like, and you have this tweet, so I'm sure Phil can pull it up. It's talking about great inventions. Bitcoin is a test of mankind to see if man can sustain it and use it for his own advancement. I've always said that Bitcoin is for people who basically can't access the capital, the property that the ultra wealthy can access. This is the opportunity for the low, middle, even upper middle class to kind of get a leg up in society, bring the value back to the value creators. And in my opinion, because of their brainwashing, because of their numbness to critical thinking, like I think Torb just said recently, are people who need Bitcoin, are they failing this test?
Yeah, I've written an article called "Bitcoin as a Test," which goes into a whole lot more detail, and it's kind of almost even a piece of poetry rather than an essay. I wonder if we could get up part of that to discuss it, because, like I said, I didn't know which tweets you'd be talking about, but we are being tested. And Bitcoin is this gift. It's something like the likes of which we've never seen before. It's an opportunity to restore certain ideas and restore them in a way that is unbreakable and immalleable, right? So, and the ideas are ideas around financial freedom, the freedom to transact with other people as you see fit, without surveillance and control of the king or some other ruler, the state, the World Economic Forum, whatever group that is. And so we're being tested that we have to preserve it and protect it. And what we discussed earlier about like the core versus filter debate is part of that test. And I actually think we're passing with flying colors. Like, Bitcoin has gotten stronger through every challenge that it's faced because there have been people here who have fought for those principles, right? Whether it was the block size wars, which were really 2 or 3 different wars at the same time, one against corporations, once against miners, and there was a distinction between them, whether it was how Taproot got activated, whether it's what's happening with inscriptions right now. But like through none of it are we breaking Bitcoin's promises and Bitcoin's freedom to those who want to exercise that freedom. The censorship resistance, the permissionlessness, the supply cap, the inability to, all of these promises have been kept. And you may have to work hard to cash in on that promise, but it's there for you to cash in on. Whereas if Bitcoin wasn't here, anybody's bank accounts could get frozen at any time for any reason by the powers that be, and you're basically locked out of civilization. You'd be better off in prison than financially frozen outside of prison, right? If you can't buy things, you have to live by your wits alone, by your own means, without the ability to transact. And we've seen it in enough places, whether it's individuals getting financially frozen or whether it's an entire country having its financial resources wiped out through massive inflationary devaluation of the currency. This happens to people in the real world. So what Bitcoin is bringing is a tremendous value for nations and individuals. And it's testing us to see, like, what I think I was getting at when I said that is, as long as we fight for it, we get to keep it. But that's the test, because if we stop fighting for it, we lose it.
I wanted to ask you, what was the name of the article? I'm scrolling through your Medium.
It's called Bitcoin as a Test.
Oh, you wrote a lot of stuff.
Yeah, I have.
You've written a lot of good stuff here. So
yeah,
I'm just looking for the Bitcoin as a test.
And I guess, you know, while he's looking for that, let's just go back to just go to this question. You know, is Bitcoin concretized collective consciousness? Is this, what kind of buzzword are you trying to get viral, Tony?
Yes. Yeah.
All right. Okay. So,
well, I got to pull that one out.
Collective consciousness, right? Again, let's not try to make it too big a thing, right? Collective consciousness would be, and there's no definition of it, because what was Freud's student's name is on the tip of my tongue right now. The great psychiatrist. Anyhow, he talked about collective unconscious. Sorry?
Jung or Schopenhauer?
Yes.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, so he talked about a collective unconscious. But a collective consciousness would be something that we're all aware of and sharing. And Bitcoin, to me, is a very important mention in that. Like, everyone who is in Bitcoin, especially everyone who runs a node, agrees on the rules, agrees on the state of the system. Right? We all agree on what the first block hash is and what the last block hash is, what every block hash in between is, every transaction that gets hashed together in Merkle trees to form that block hash that happens there. So there's this collective agreement that everyone who's in Bitcoin has signed off on and can be aware of, and they can audit the supply. And so it's this collective consciousness that we're all sharing, and it's impacting us all in different ways. And then simply to say, you know, consciousness is not concrete, it's an abstract, it's intangible, but Bitcoin is tangible. You know, it's like, it's very small if it's like encoded on an SSD drive and it's encoded in words, but it's concrete, right? And you can touch it and you can feel it, and and you can experience it. So that's what I'm getting at. It's like, we've created a collective consciousness and we've concretized it in a way that is immalleable, right? Like, concrete means real and hard to destroy. Bitcoin is the most indestructible thing we've ever created, right? Like, because it's cloned itself all over the world and updates its cloned state every time a new block is found all over the world. The destruction of Bitcoin is almost impossible, and the erasure of Bitcoin, because it uses this proof of work, greatest proof of work method to sustain itself, even changing. You know, the most recent record takes an incredible amount of energy, but changing something that's 6 records old, let alone 100,000 records old, would require, more energy than humanity is capable of producing. So it's the most concrete thing we've ever actually built.
You're getting a question from the audience here. Torip wants to know if you're going to freeze your head like hell.
Absolutely not. No. Whatever comes next, and I don't want to miss out on it.
I'm the same way. Yeah, no frozen.
Wait, did Hal Finney really freeze his head?
Well, he's all. I mean, supposedly he's all frozen, right? Supposedly he's in that cryogenic.
Oh, did he? I never even knew that story. Oh, okay.
Yeah. This is the whole. So this is kind of like another piece of a, I guess you'd say, like a conspiracy rabbit hole type of thing, right? How Bitcoin and HAL are essentially related to all of these life extension services, and supposedly that like country there, what's it called, Propecia or Pro whatever, the weird little I think that's a drug. Propecia.
Liberia.
It's that place there that Samson, they're making that tiny little country that's like a city, or
oh man,
what's it called?
I didn't hear
this, but I know what you're talking about.
Prospera or something like that. Anyways, so all of this supposedly is tied into the life services stuff. So I mean, and again, anybody can go down that rabbit hole. I don't really. Yeah, I don't really care about the, teach their own. People who want to keep this meat suit,
I'd much rather turn the
Yeah.
countries we live in into Bitcoin places than try to build some kind of kludgy Bitcoin space where there's other people already with other priorities. I just think, the mix over there might not turn out to be exactly right.
Yeah, I agree. I think that de-evolves into some form of tyranny. Because
I
humans
don't want to say I know it does. I'm just like I'm here where I am working on Bitcoin.
You just have this feeling,
Mhm.
Oh wait, sorry, that's the tooth one. I didn't want to show the tooth one yet.
Not yet.
Yeah, I wanted to go back to your article.
You want to go to Bitcoin as a test?
Yes. Yes. Okay. Where did you want me to go? Here we are.
I can just, if you kind of scroll through it, I'll just, because it's probably a good read. Bitcoin tests you, right? It tests your curiosity, it tests your intelligence, it tests your patience, it tests your character, it tests your honesty, it tests your integrity and your courage. It tests your willingness to take risks, and it tests your care in avoiding unnecessary dangers. It tests your ability to distinguish the truth from a lie. It tests your conviction, your skill, your creativity, your independence, your relationships, your priorities, your mind, body, and soul. And it shows you the results of these tests. Sometimes you get rewarded, other times you get punished. And yet within each test, Bitcoin always teaches you a lesson. And the lesson itself is another test to see what you will learn from that lesson. So Bitcoin is a teacher. It teaches you about you. It teaches you to reshape and improve yourself. And it does this through its tests and lessons. And it lets you see the results. And so it's also a mirror. The more you look in this mirror, the more it can show you about you. And see how these tests and lessons change you. You grow and you can see your growth. You see growth in your curiosity, your intelligence, your patience, character, honesty, integrity, and courage. And you learn to take ever increasing yet calculated risks. You get better at distinguishing truth from lies, and you see your conviction growing. You develop new skills and you apply them, and you express your creativity and you bravely put it on display. You see your independence rise and you shed your dependency on others, and you see previously unseen details in your relationships with other people, with organizations, and with nature itself. You make changes in these relationships for the betterment of you. You see the things that you have prioritized in your past, and you reevaluate your priorities and establish new ones. You activate and focus your mind more. You emerge from a slumber. You take better care of your body. You emerge from being sedentary. And maybe you even discover the true nature of your soul. And Bitcoin thus changes you, but only if you let it. It takes you on a journey of education that's filled with tests, and it's an educational journey that takes place not in a classroom, but in reality itself, and leads to a transformation. It results in you looking in the mirror and liking what you see and loving who you are. Each time you look in this mirror, after passing yet another test, you may love what you see even more. This is what it means to be a successful human being, to honestly and rationally know what you want, to act virtuously, to make your desires real, to know it was you who did it. So make the most of your life. Take the test.
I'm so happy.
That is a mic drop.
I'm so happy that you didn't make that 21 tests. I just feel like if there is some other person online that made that article, they would say it has to be 21. If I found 22 or 19, it's ruin the whole thought.
Yeah,
it would feel like everything that you said there. It's like it takes place in reality, not in a school. There's so many people that say you can only learn, or they may not even say that, but they exude this. You can only learn in school and
reality as opposed to institutions, right? Like this is one of the biggest lessons Bitcoin teaches you is institutions don't have dominion over reality. They exist in reality. They have to bend to reality, not try to bend reality to what they say. And we live in this age of cognitive dissonance where bankers and modern monetary theorists and economists and all sorts of theoreticians try to tell us that what is obviously not real is real, and we call it gaslighting or cognitive dissonance in terms of, if it's a little bit more honest. But the reality is what it is. Human beings are what they are. Human beings can be glorious and wonderful individuals if they're left to pursue freedom, and their incentives are aligned with being productive and being rational and being honest and being kind towards one another. But when we live in a broken system that is stealing from us, cheating us, lying to us, misinforming us, trying to paint other people as villains when they're not, or incentivized to create divisiveness between us, we find ourselves emotionally triggered, angry, and unable to think rationally and to be the best selves we are. And I think Bitcoin allows you to take yourself right out of it completely. I'm taking my ball and going home. I'm going to Bitcoin, right? I'm taking my money out of this system that's filled with corruption and lies and deception. And now I'm free. And it doesn't mean that it's easy. Freedom isn't easy. Freedom is responsibility and living with the consequences of your decisions. Freedom is a test, right? And you can screw up a little bit, you can screw up a lot, but Bitcoin is a test because Bitcoin frees you to test yourself. So I know you guys have other tweets, but
if you let it, it's an opt-in.
Yeah.
Opt-in network, and you voiced that in that piece. I've never seen that piece, but again, for me coming into Bitcoin, altcoining, shitcoining 2017, and finally recognizing how important this is in 2020. You were in your peak writing mode back in 21, and so seeing all these pieces that I missed from you is like, oh man, you're going to have me going back to Bitcoin magazine, submitting my stuff to CK again, like it was 2021, following Tomer. I was like, man, these are nuggets of wisdom that most people just will never see. And it's a shame. And that's why I like to bring these things to light. I'm happy you're here, man.
Yeah,
Thanks.
Absolutely. And to go to your point, right? This is the another one that you said, and I think it's absolutely true. Man who finds his calling in something greater than himself, greater than his life, greater than his time, has found a way to experience what is beyond himself, his life, and his time. That's right. You're talking about immortality,
or extension. Well, right? I'm talking about getting out of the immediate, getting out of what is just entirely sensory, like this. A baby has this very ego-driven existence. I'm hungry. I need to eat. I need to poo. I'll poo right here. It's all me. And many of us don't really grow up all that much from it. But part of the beauty of all the stuff that we've invented and achieved and created is there are things that are much longer than your lifetime, and Bitcoin is one of them. There are things that are much bigger in purpose than you alone. It's all of society. And so the ability to go beyond yourself, beyond your time, beyond your life is there. And it's extraordinary. Many people are so caught up in, well, that sounds like you're trying to get me to live for the sake of somebody else. It's like, absolutely not. I want you to live for the sake of what you value, but your value is not just limited to this physical meat bag that you are. You can abstract your knowledge to higher levels and connect with them and achieve, success for those things if you want. And I guess what I'm saying is for men who do that, I'm not trying to be gender specific. I just like the use of the word man better than person. For the person who wants that, they can achieve it. And it's just a bit of surrender and letting go of that infantile egoism of yours, experiencing ego death in whatever way you may choose to try to bring it on. But once you do that, you sense you're part of something much, much bigger, much more whole, much more valuable. And that doesn't mean you end up destroying your life. Like your life becomes a part of something that's much bigger than your life.
So would you say that separateness is an illusion, right? Because essentially, right, it all depends on what you believe, but to a certain extent, right, we came from somewhere.
I wouldn't say it's an illusion. I say you get to decide where to draw the lines, and you can redraw them when you want, right? So like I can draw a line right now and say, me, Tomer, this person needs to go and eat, right? And I can draw it broader as my family and say, like, my daughter needs me to drive her somewhere later today. And I can take it to the whole nation or to all the Bitcoiners or to the whole universe. And, you decide you're part of the universe. Like you can't dispute it. But, so you're not a part from the universe. You're a
right?
part of it. but you can choose what to
You're
focus
separate.
on, right? And that, I think that's at the heart of the free will that you have, is you get to decide what to focus your time and energy on and what you want to relate to. You don't get to change reality by snapping your fingers. You have to accept it as it is. But one of the things about it is it's bigger than you and it's bigger than the narrow definition of you. And you can attach and identify to bigger parts of it and pursue the actions that will lead to the betterment of things that are bigger than just yourself. Bitcoin is one of those things.
You know, I think when I hear the idea of snapping your fingers just to change everything, you know, I see that in how people believe economics can work and what they think the power of the central bank is, where they can change rates,
right,
and they can essentially drive economic value to one place or another. A president can speak and drives value from one entity to another.
right.
And people have been groomed through Keynesian economics to essentially believe and hold firm to that and like that. Whereas Bitcoin, you know, things that matter, things that are real, take time. These things are titanics. And that value exchange, moving value from one idea to another, is like shifting the Titanic. And all those things are such great movements, but those movements are real and legitimate, whereas the ones in the Keynesian construct create boom and bust cycles because they're false. So my question is, why do people essentially want to live in the lie that is created or that is established by this Keynesian worldview?
Well, you know, people are brought up in a cultural mythology of what goes on. So people who would have been brought up 200 years ago would have had a particular view of the world. In our view of the world, I think we've really been brought up with the mythology that government can fix everything, and it's fine for government to be in charge of everything. You know, you go to school, that's a government-run school, a government-paid-for school, and so it's implicit that the government's there for your betterment, right? And you have to be a real critical thinker to wake up from the matrix. And in most countries, the healthcare system's also provided, and the roads are provided. And so we think that government has this magical power to wave its wand and create wealth. And you see a lot of politicians promising all sorts of things. And then you get the rational economic actors saying, you can't just make free healthcare and free dental care and free this and free that and free this. It doesn't come for free because it doesn't exist for free. Work has to be put in to create this thing. And it turns out it isn't free, right? You have to pay taxes in order to pay for these things. They're not actually free. And the way that they get executed is not actually as perfect as if it would have been delivered through a free market. And free markets aren't perfect, but they at least have the success, and the test of failure causes something to shut down, right? Whereas in government, we don't have the same test. So I think people genuinely believe it because they don't know anything else, right? It's like you have to take an alternate education to come to the view that education should not necessarily be provided for free by the state in a monopolistic fashion and treat all individuals by and large the same at the same age, at the same time, regardless of location and natural skill and all this other stuff. So people believe what they're raised to believe. You know, not everybody is an independent critical thinker, and for new ideas to break through and take place, they have to first be discovered, and then they need to spread in a way that that is sticky, right? And so we're always going through some transitions in reviewing traditional thinking, but thinking takes, you know, the collective consciousness, if you will, takes a long time to shift.
I've always I've kind of thought about this because you know, it's like you can have two siblings, right? They can have the quote unquote same material opportunities, right? They have the same parents, they grew up in the same house and everything like that, and yet one of them comes out to question everyday reality, question what they're being told and everything like that, and the other one simply chooses to conform, but yet they've both had the same environment. Right. So it is a personal choice. Like some people, like they like they don't want to venture off into the things that are unknown just because they're afraid of what they might find. Whereas others of us simply, we don't want to be afraid, so we want to learn. I don't know, like I've always thought about that, right? Like I thought about that even with my best friends growing up, right? We went to the same parties, we had the same teachers, you know what I mean? Like we experienced the same things, although we were different people experiencing these things. And yet, right, one of us, let's say, becomes a more critical thinker, or a person more willing to question the narratives that you're given as reality, and the other person is just simply happy to go along.
Yeah.
Yeah,
listen, I think that there's so many different personas out there, so many different archetypes. That, your brother's example is a good one, but it's a very narrow one. I see a lot of people who want to be critical thinkers, but are very vulnerable to logical fallacies, and they think that they're absolutely convinced that they're right when you could point out to them everything that they're wrong about, how it's arbitrary in nature, how it's appeal to authority, how it's appeal to popularity, that it's not actually reality. But they're quite convinced, and they put the effort into convincing themselves. So, it's not that they choose to be passive. They want to be active. They're just, their activity is harmful to them and those around them. Right? Like that. There's all sorts of problems. And I think, this is why I'm so keen. And I don't think I'm going to succeed in changing the world on this, but I might change a few people's lives in helping people understand how to think critically, how to be in control of their emotions, what the art of thinking is, what I could recommend for them to read, to do, so that they can navigate this world. And that when they see someone who's hijacked or irrational or something else, they don't have to enter an argument with them. Like the point of being able to think critically for yourself is not that you win arguments with people on the internet, right? Like you probably won't because they won't acknowledge that you've won the argument, and you may just feel smug about it. But it's to find the truth for yourself and to act in correspondence with reality. And one truth is many people don't act in correspondence with reality and the truth. So you have to come to accept that human beings are fallible. They're not all perfectly rational. We're not like Vulcans in Star Trek. We have emotions. We have all these failings, and that's not to say then that human beings aren't special and wonderful and each filled with tremendous potential. We each have that potential to be extraordinary and great, right? But we need to foster those things that make us wonderful and great, rather than just go whichever way the wind blows and be like wild animals in a civilized but collapsing civilization world.
You just got me thinking of another book that I was reading called The Elephant in the Brain, and it goes exactly to your point, right? Essentially, that people are thinking that they or we imagine, right, that we're thinking critically, but really we're just falling for these unknown fallacies that in some cases we don't even know. And to your point, right, it's not about winning arguments on the internet. It's in my eyes, it's about thinking accurately, or learning to think accurately, or learning the mechanisms in order to produce accurate thinking, so it's like it's a lot, and you can see why people don't want to do this. Like, listen to what we're talking about. This is a lot of
It's so much easier to call somebody else an idiot than it is, right, to find the truth. The truth is hard to find. People spend their whole lives documenting part of something. Do you know how we discovered that the planets orbit the sun? It took lifetimes of people, one guy logging the star charts for years and years and years of all the positions of the planets, and then other people studying that, and someone finally having the eureka moment to say, wait, the reason that the direction of these things changes in the night sky is because they're orbiting the sun and we're passing them. And so, they were moving away from us, but then we passed them, and so they're moving behind us. And that's what retrograde is. Like, it took, and to the precision of the measurements was limited, and the precision of the calculations was limited. Like, people did this all with paper and pencil and like instruments hundreds of years ago. There was no computer, no silicone, hardly anything in the way of machines. And it took us until just a few hundred years ago to be able to come up with a heliocentric model of the solar system. So like finding the truth is hard work, often requires like an autistic level of focus and passion and commitment to a topic. And then you can learn it and validate it sometimes with less effort. I think that's part of what we learned through Bitcoin mining, right? Like it's hard to do the work. It's not hard to verify it, but it's some work to verify, right? Like it's not self-verifying. So yeah, that's if you want to be able to use this thing that's in your head the way it's, to its fullest potential, it's going to take work. It's an instrument that requires energy.
Hey Phil, pull up the
one?
teeth tweet. It's
teeth?
time to pull
Okay.
up it's time because
we've gone too cosmic. We've gone too cosmic. Tomer's
realize. I guess we probably have to go a little bit. We have to go back to the microvision now, because now we see how.
Yeah, I see a question here from one of the listeners. It says, "What does it take to become passionate about finding truth? Is it to suffer from lies?" Maybe yes. I think for me personally, I had a close family member who was a compulsive liar growing up. And I actually vividly remember one day in the shower saying, I'm going to spend my life pursuing the truth. I've had it with these lies, and so, and do I regret that decision? No. But did I have any idea what I was in store for? Also, no. Right. Because there's so many lies, and the truth about them reveals all kinds of failings and disappointments in other people, and then so to not lose your faith in humanity or your love of humanity when you realize how badly we failed at how many things, it's that's one of the harder truths to confront, but it's it is worth it. The alternative is to live in a lie.
Yeah, I completely agree, and I can tell you that. So that it's interesting that you bring that up, right? That you had a compulsive liar in your history, and that led you to truth. I can tell you in my particular case, it has to do with having emotionally immature and narcissistic people who essentially only train you to serve them. So all of a sudden, what you believe is true is really just behaviors and thought patterns to serve another person.
Yeah.
Specifically because they cannot serve themselves, so to speak. Right. So it's like because they can't be good enough to be the arbiter of truth for themselves, they need you to be truthful. They need you to be responsible because they do not have the courage to be truthful and responsible. Anyways, I find this stuff so interesting, so fascinating, and my wife is a therapist, so I'm like her number one patient. Anyways, learned a lot, became a better person, but we're going to switch gears. And we're also wrapping up at some point soon here. Tomer's got to get back to his life. We have to let him go, even though we just want to keep him here all day and keep philosophizing. But yeah, here we go. We're going to talk about some of the embarrassing stuff that's happening.
And maybe it's a good segue, because I just feel like the person who mentioned the teeth didn't seem to be able to confront reality in front of her. She kept saying she was wrong. She was wrong about MicroStrategy. We're not MicroStrat's shill, but of course there was something that was happening with this Bitcoin dynamic that she wasn't able to digest, and yet still talking with Michael Saylor, she was able to come up with this silly analogy about how human teeth are as important as Bitcoin. And so, look, obviously this was in jest, this was sarcasm, but if you can kind of try to break down, we're not just here to make fun of her, because I think that's happened enough, but maybe try to break down, why did she fail to grasp the reality in front of her?
I mean, this is a really tough question, right? You're asking me to psychologize another person who, and I didn't even watch the full 27-minute video of hers. I watched that introduction where she basically says, I don't get, I shorted MicroStrategy in the company office pool. I lost big time on it. So there's something wrong, but I don't get Bitcoin. I don't understand it. They say it's because it's scarce, and my teeth are scarce and they're very useful, but they're not worth billions of dollars. Like, that's what she said. Right. Yep. It's almost your exact quote. And so, you really want to unwrap that. It's like it hits you in the face. Like, wow, I've heard criticisms of Bitcoin, but I have teeth, and they're useful, not as money, but they're useful for chewing food. and they look good in a mouth and everyone's got them and they're easy to use. Like, so why aren't they worth billions of dollars? And like, there's such a detachment to use that as your metaphor of what you're comparing to Bitcoin from what money is. You know, like she doesn't have a definition of money in her head, right? That's clear, because if you go to teeth in your mouth that you use to chew food and you say, but I can't exchange that for money, it's like, wow, like, okay, understand money is an instrument that you don't consume, but that you use solely for exchange purposes for other goods and services. It's a very different thing than what you use your teeth for or any other part of your body for. You're not exchanging it. So she chose a metaphor that is so distant and remote from money that that one wants to question what her critical reasoning skills are, right? I don't want to say she's stupid, but when it comes to this topic, which should be an expert at, she doesn't even have a working definition of money. Like, if she said gold, okay, and like, now we can talk about gold is scarce and it is used as money, and it has been used as money longer. So why, and it's tangible and Bitcoin isn't. So come at it from some other thing that people might want to use as money, say cigarettes even, right? Like, at least you can exchange them or consume them. But in the case someone's saying she's honest that she doesn't know anything, but it's like, well, if you're going to be a subject matter expertise and a financial reporter and interview Michael Saylor about Bitcoin, it would be handy if you knew the first thing about money, right? And I don't know how to analyze her any more than that. Maybe there were some comments that can do a better job than I can, but like, that was just so far away from anything. It was like the worst criticism of Bitcoin everyone had.
Right.
But like, so Roman's saying she was just a pawn or something.
Yes.
For the puppet master, but like, gee, like the puppet masters can have better puppets, right? Like, you
Right?
could. There's so many better things. It's so preposterous. It's like, I don't think anyone was sitting there and going, hold on a minute. I have teeth too, and they're very valuable to me. Bitcoin doesn't make any sense. Like, it's such a non sequitur. There's no connection, in my mind at least, between teeth and money. That
I have Tomer, I have a friend that's literally told me this year that Bitcoin is just a Chinese money laundering scam. And he's my age. I grew up with him. He's a business owner.
Okay, but that's better than teeth.
It is better than that.
It requires
it's
believing something that isn't
similarly.
true, but it's like, okay, we're talking about money and laundering it. Okay, like, now we can address something concrete, right? But like the teeth thing, there's no way to respond. Like, if I was in Michael Saylor's shoes and she said, I have teeth and they're very valuable, I would have gotten up and walked out. Like, how do you respond to that?
So this kind of goes back to that 2017 type of argument, right? Like the stupidity of okay, fine. Yeah, I'm not going to be nice. We're not going to say stupid. We'll say weak. Okay. We'll say like these weak arguments from 2017. And I genuinely feel like she's one of these people that they've just revived to come up and say these narratives. She kind of reminds me of Stephen Hanke. Yeah, she kind of reminds me.
Hanke was an interesting character. I haven't heard from him in years. I think he blocked me. Maybe I blocked him. I don't know. But at least he was talking about money. But it's very frustrating to think, wow, like someone, if they're going to persuade her, or maybe Michael Saylor, I don't think Michael Saylor did at the end of the day, right, has to engage at that level of discourse. Like, what do you think money is? What do you think teeth are? Why, like, do you see why teeth can't, when you take them out of your mouth, they lose their usefulness. You can't give them to somebody and they're useful to that somebody else. Like, do you see how different this is than money? Maybe it's something as simple as that, just to try to walk the bridge. But for someone to hold an idea that's so distant from reality, they must hold so many other ideas, like in disconnected compartments. It's like disintegrated thinking to a level that I've honestly never really think that I've seen before. That was just such a far out thing that it made no sense at all, other than to be humored and made fun of.
And get engagement, which they win. They win. They got the engagement for that. You know, like they got they got a good portion of us to engage with it. And
Yeah, I don't know that it helps them that much though. Like at the end of the day,
I agree.
you
It
know,
doesn't.
Bitcoin's hit an all-time high since, right? So it's
Yeah.
not like they did any harm to Bitcoin.
And your teeth are still the same. Their teeth are still.
I like my teeth. My teeth are not for sale, even for Bitcoin, right? But that doesn't mean that I'm selling all my Bitcoin for other people's teeth.
That's right.
You should watch Black Mirror episode 1. That's all I gotta say.
Which one was that one? I probably have, but it's
someone was pulling out their teeth to make ends meet. It was really hard to watch.
Oh, I remember that. Okay, yes.
This
episode. Okay.
Spoiler alert. Sorry.
Yeah, that's okay. It still doesn't ruin the whole story. It's there's a whole rest of that story that's equally as dystopian.
Enough.
But guys, that's right. We've been going for like an hour and a half, and Tomer, man, it's been absolutely amazing to have you on the show. Thank you so much. But before we go, I just want to give the viewers and listeners one last chance here. Shill your stuff. Tell them where they can find you, and guys, all of this info is going to be in the show notes.
Yeah, where to find me? Probably where I'm most active is still on Twitter. So just at Tomer Strolight. I have my Medium, tomerstrolight.medium.com, which has a bunch of articles. I'm still publishing things, but not as frequently as I used to. But it's all still relevant. Like I write what's considered evergreen content. So it's not like, hey, today the price of Bitcoin is this, and what'll it be tomorrow? It's like it's principled stuff. There's a series in there called "Who Are the Bitcoiners," and one of them is that Bitcoin is a test article that we read. There's stuff that I consider really valuable in there, and I'm happy to share it with everybody. So there's that. There's a couple of movies that I've made that are on Swan's YouTube channel. One is called Bitcoin's Generational Wealth. I can really recommend that. Another is based off an article that I wrote called The Legendary Treasure of Satoshi Nakamoto. And another one is based off another article called Bitcoin is Beautiful. So they're all different lengths. One's 14 minutes, the first one 38 for the second, and 6 or 7 minutes for the last one. I've written a couple of books. One is called Why Bitcoin. On my profile page, you can get a link if you want to buy a hard copy. But if you want a free soft copy of it, you can download it at swan.com/whybitcoin, WHYBITCOIN. And I've just recently written a second book. Oh, there's a second book for it. But it's for kids. It's called Satoshi Nakamoto and His Bitcoin Invention. I'm actually going down to the Bitcoin conference to read it to kids who are there. That's my involvement. It was a tough battle to decide whether to go or not, but if I can help kids, I will. So it's an inspiring kids book with 10 2-page chapters, or like 1-page chapter, fully illustrated, published by Shamory, who do various kids products. And I'm just happy to get it out there. There's a book that I wrote on a kind of like a dare from somebody else, and I've read it to a lot of kids and their parents, and everybody really enjoys it. And it's a short story about it's a short true story that isn't a fairy tale about something of fairy tale proportions, which is the invention and creation of Bitcoin.
Very cool. Very, very nice. All right. I am going to do my best to stick all of that stuff in the show notes.
Whatever you can get. It's all appreciated.
Well, definitely the links to your Medium articles and obviously to your Twitter, so that people can harass you and ask you cosmic stuff.
People really enjoy the movie. Like, the Bitcoin is Generational Wealth. If you haven't seen it yet, I think it's my one big contribution to Bitcoin lore, Bitcoin culture. And so if you get a chance, it's only 14 minutes, watch that full screen, lights out, sound up. It's produced in high def, and it's got some really interesting ideas about where the future is headed with Bitcoin.
Okay, that's on the Swan channel?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Bitcoin is Generational Wealth, Tomer Strolight. Google that and you'll find it.
Cool. All right, we'll get that in the show notes. That's absolutely awesome. Ulrich, any final comments here before we sign off and let the people get back to their day?
Right. When I first started writing, you were one of my heroes, or one of the archetypes I tried to emulate, or try to bring my own ideas using your style. I think we hit it off well when we finally met in person.
Absolutely.
But your evergreen content is going to be evergreen for a long time, sir. And it was one of my goals to bring up people that inspired me to and share a stage with you. So or share the stage with them. So, I checked this one off the box. I hope that you can come join us again in the near future. Tomer, it's been an honor, and I'll see you on the X machine.
Yeah, we'll see you guys there. It's been a blast. All the best.
Absolutely awesome. All right, guys, you know the drill. This episode is going to be uploaded for audio only for Apple Podcasts and Spotify. And if you decide to stream us sats, check us out on fountain.fm. Even if you don't stream us sats, you want to check us out on fountain.fm anyways.
Stream them some sats, guys. It's like 1,000 sats.
I think my limit's even lower.
Let people for a whole episode. And if you stop listening, you stop streaming. So,
see, there you go. All right, guys, that does it for us. That does it for this episode of Pleb Underground, and we will catch you on the next one. Peace.
Take care, guys.